when you think about just walking through a normal, busy day, it often feels like being stuck inside a giant pinball machine.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right. Like you are the silver ball, and every single thing you encounter is a bumper, a delayed train, maybe a spilled cup of coffee, or, just a rude comment from a stranger.
Right. And it just launches you in a completely different direction.
Exactly. You are entirely at the mercy of the machine's physics, just reacting to the chaos. Bing, bing, bing.
Yeah, you're bouncing from one external stimulus to the next without any real trajectory. I mean, you just have this momentum that's dictated by whatever happened to hit you last.
Which is exhausting.
It really is. It's a highly reactive, completely neurologically exhausting way to exist.
But, imagine if instead of being the silver ball getting knocked around by the flippers, you could somehow become the gravity itself.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, what if you decided exactly how things bounce off of you? And that is the exact psychological flip proposed by this deeply obscure text we're doing a deep dive into today.
Yes, it's an excerpt from a series called the 501 Empire Transmissions.
Specifically, we're looking at something titled The Helios Masterclass, Navigation of the Cosmic Frequency.
Yeah, and the central figure of this text is Helios, who is often referred to as the mad philosopher.
The Mad Philosopher, which is quite the title.
It is. And he lays out this concept he calls the symmetry of the splendid day, which is basically a blueprint for moving from that reactive state you mentioned into a proactive state.
So he's essentially showing us how to rewrite the underlying code of a normal, frustrating day.
Exactly.
And the goal here isn't just to, read a diary of what Helios did from morning to night. Our mission today is to really explore his radically different perspective on personal agency.
Right, and energy conservation, like what it actually takes to consciously navigate the friction of everyday life.
Yeah. And whether you, the listener, consider yourself a spiritual seeker or just a really fierce, boots-on-the-ground pragmatist, Helios's methods for dealing with these daily, he calls them glitches, they offer a fascinating mental framework for reclaiming your time and your peace.
They really do.
Yeah.
And the entire foundation of his philosophy actually relies on preempting the noise.
Right. So the deep dive starts where his day begins, which is incredibly early.
Yeah, 4:30 a.m. According to the text, he intentionally gets up while the rest of the world is still caught in what he calls the heavy sleep of the unconscious.
A heavy sleep of the unconscious. That's so poetic.
It is, yeah. And he uses this specific hyper-early hour for prayer and preparation to, quote, set his frequency.
Set his frequency.
Yeah, he describes it as the absolute bedrock for the miracles that follow.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's like a musician claiming the absolute quietest room in a really busy house just to perfectly tune their instrument before the rest of the orchestra arrives and the noise begins.
And it's a perfect analogy, yes.
Yeah. But let me ask you a clarifying question here. Does Helios believe the power lies in the literal hour of 4:30 a.m.? Or is it more about the psychological advantage of just preempting the chaos of the world?
I mean, it's deeply psychological. Synthesizing this concept of setting the frequency, it's really about establishing an internal baseline, like a locus of control, before external forces have any chance to dictate your mood.
Because if you think about the typical modern morning routine, it's pretty brutal.
Oh, it's awful.
An alarm jars you awake, you immediately grab your phone, you scan your work emails, maybe you check the news.
Right, and from the very first second of consciousness, your brain is just flooded with cortisol.
Exactly. You're literally letting the outside world tune your internal instrument.
Yes, and by acting while the world is still unconscious, Helios is taking the first definitive move of the day. He isn't waiting to see what kind of day the world is going to hand him.
Right. The stillness of 4:30 a.m. provides this pristine environment that's completely devoid of external static.
Yeah, he moves from being a passive participant to being the architect of his reality.
It kind of reminds me of radio bandwidth. Like he's essentially taking up the bandwidth early.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if you transmit your own signal strongly enough at 4:30 a.m., you establish that mental clarity. Then when the external noise of the day finally starts, it just can't override your station.
Right. The chaos of the world just comes through as faint static in the background.
While your signal remains the dominant frequency in your own head.
That internal dominance is precisely what he's cultivating. Doing that mental heavy lifting before dawn is everything.
Okay, but it's easy to be the architect of your reality in a perfectly silent room at dawn, right?
Sure.
But the real stress test of this philosophy comes with friction. Like, what happens to that perfectly calibrated frequency the second it actually collides with the chaotic incompetence of the outside world?
And that brings us to what Helios calls An impossible alignment.
Yes, the incident with the print. This is such a
Yeah.
wild story.
It's a really striking narrative, honestly. It pushes the boundaries of how we interact with the physical world.
So, okay, he had created this deeply personal, sacred image. It was a specific print designed solely for his private morning praise.
Right, so it's highly valuable to him.
Very valuable. He takes it to a printing company, and they just completely botch the job. They lose his precious print in the back of a taxi.
Just gone. Swallowed by the massive void of a bustling city's transit system.
Yeah. And for anyone else, I mean, that is a day-ruining glitch. You trusted a professional, they failed, and your sacred object is just missing.
But the text details that later that exact same day, Helios is just standing on a random street corner. He signals a cab, gets into the passenger seat, and sitting right there on the dashboard is his lost print.
Wait, out of all the cabs in the city, he flags down the exact one carrying his sacred image.
Exactly. And he uses this event to illustrate what he calls the law of magnetism.
A law of magnetism.
Yeah. He writes, what you breathe life into is spiritually tethered to you.
So he frames this not as just a really lucky coincidence, but as the cosmic, recognizing rightful ownership.
Right, bypassing the print shop's failure entirely.
Right.
Because he breathed intention and life into that print, he believes it became energetically linked to his frequency.
Okay, I have to pause here. I really need to push back on this a little bit on behalf of the pragmatic listener.
Go for it.
I mean, I hear the psychological benefit of not panicking, but as a pragmatist, if I drop my wallet in a city of millions, I'm immediately canceling my credit cards. I'm not trusting a cosmic tether.
Fair point, yeah.
So is Helios confusing brilliant emotional regulation with magical thinking? Is he earnestly suggesting we have literal energetic homing beacons attached to the things we care about?
Well, Helios's text absolutely suggests he is sincere about the literal energetic homing beacon. He truly believes the physical world bends to intentional frequency.
Wow. Okay.
But even if you don't buy the mystical reality, let's look at the immense psychological utility of this belief. Think about the biological cascade of losing something valuable. Your heart rate spikes, your amygdala triggers a fight or flight response.
You experience acute anger at the print shop.
Exactly. You feel victimized by the universe, and you burn an immense amount of cognitive energy spiraling over an event you cannot control.
You essentially shatter the frequency you just spent your 4:30 a.m. hour carefully tuning.
That is exactly the point. By viewing the world through this lens of magnetism, a frustrating lost item transforms from a random, maddening annoyance into a test of your spiritual tethering.
Oh, wow. I see what you mean.
Right. If you truly believe the item is tethered to your frequency, you don't panic. You maintain your baseline. You just expect its return.
So the belief itself acts as an emotional shock absorber.
Yes, it prevents the external glitch from overriding his internal system, which conserves his energy.
Okay, so this brilliant mental framework keeps him out of the pinball machine when it comes to inanimate objects and professional accidents. But what happens when the glitch isn't a lost item, but actual people actively trying to drag you down? Because it's easy to believe in cosmic harmony when the universe returns your lost belongings.
Yeah, that is where the philosophy really meets human nature.
So by noon, according to the source, the heat is literally and metaphorically on.
Yes, Helios is engaged in heavy labor, moving materials out in the hot sun.
And his mental circuitry is aggressively tested when he enters what he calls a den of clowns.
Clowns, right. He describes these individuals as vibrating at the frequency of envy and disrespect.
And they try to create a massive glitch over a petty $50 dispute.
Yeah, they are actively trying to pull him into a quarrel to just drag him down into their mud.
And this is a scenario I think everyone listening can map onto their own life, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the last time a coworker sent a subtly disrespectful email copying your boss.
Or a stranger cut you off and brake checked you on the highway.
Right. Our biological instinct is to fire back. We have these mirror neurons in our brains that essentially compel us to match the emotional state of the people around us.
Exactly. If someone raises their voice, you feel a neurological urge to raise yours.
If they introduce aggression, your body floods with adrenaline to fight back and win the dispute.
But Helios refuses to engage on their level. He explicitly notes that he didn't give them his voice.
Yes. Instead, he uses a technique he calls the anchor of stillness.
The anchor of stillness.
Yeah, he basically grounds himself in his own authority, maintaining this invisible pressure of peace that these clowns just could not break.
And after holding that anchor, he calmly buys a soda and just walks away.
Let's examine the physics of that metaphor, though.
Hmm.
An anchor.
Okay.
When you introduce a dense, incredibly heavy mass into a chaotic system, everything else is forced to orbit it.
Right.
The antagonists in this scenario are frantic, high energy, but they're low mass. They are trying to pass their erratic current onto him.
Because an argument requires two conductors to pass the electricity back and forth, right?
Exactly. And by becoming perfectly still, Helios stops the current entirely.
It's such a fascinating contrast to how we usually talk about resolving conflict. Like, you hear the phrase emotional aikido thrown around a lot.
Right, where you use an attacker's momentum against them.
Yes, but notice the difference here. Aikido implies you are still emotionally interacting with their momentum.
Right.
Helios isn't even touching their momentum. He is dropping a dead weight. And there is a phenomenal quote from the text that perfectly captures this. He says, "You don't defeat chaos by fighting it. You defeat it by being the heaviest presence in the room."
That is such a powerful reframe. It totally flips our standard definition of winning and losing an argument.
Yeah, because normally when you just walk away from a public aggressive challenge, your ego tells you that you lost.
You feel smaller, like you retreated.
But Helios specifically frames this encounter as turning a conflict into a future asset. He walked away feeling larger.
Right. By holding his frequency and refusing to speak, he basically proved to himself that his morning tuning at 4:30 a.m. actually worked.
It wasn't just hypothetical peace in a quiet room. It was bulletproof peace in a den of clowns.
He protected his most valuable resource, which is his attention. He didn't spend his carefully cultivated frequency on people vibrating at envy.
And that preserved cognitive and emotional energy is the future asset he walks away with.
Exactly.
So up until this point in the masterclass, we've seen Helios playing this brilliant, impenetrable defense, right?
Yeah.
He sets his frequency in the morning to defend against the chaos. He trusts his internal locus of control when an item is lost, and he deploys the anchor of stillness to block the aggressive static of others.
But as the afternoon progresses, the text reveals a shift.
Right. He moves from simply blocking chaos to actively shaping his path, bending the environment to his will.
And this is what he calls the junction decree. It's the moment where the philosophy transitions from internal preservation to external command.
So the text sets a very specific scene here. Helios arrives at a crossroads he refers to as the junction, and he's intending to catch a bus.
But immediately, he senses a wall of conflicted energy, pure static, blocking the flow of the area.
And I mean, think about how the average person behaves at a delayed bus stop.
Oh, we stare at our phones, we sigh loudly.
Right, we check our watches, we share this low-level misery with the other commuters. We essentially become victims of the transit schedule.
But Helios recognizes the energetic blockage and takes a radically different approach. He sits down directly in the middle of it, and he remains in absolute silence for a full 20 minutes to outlast the negativity.
I just want to raise a practical observation for you, the listener here. Think about how agonizingly long 20 minutes of pure silence is in a public space.
Especially when you're actively trying to get somewhere.
Right. In our hyper-connected modern world, waiting 20 seconds for a web page to load feels like an eternity.
It really does.
So sitting alone with your thoughts, just staring down a wall of bad vibes for 20 minutes, that requires immense psychological endurance.
He's testing his frequency against the ambient anxiety of the environment. He is outlasting the static.
And then, prompted by what he describes as a signal from his spirit, he breaks that 20-minute silence with a sudden, loud laugh.
Yeah, and he issues a verbal decree. He says, the path is clear. The bus is coming.
And literally at that exact moment, the bus driver appears, clears the way, recognizes Helios's rank, and Helios takes a seat in what he terms the silence of victory.
It's incredible.
I really have to unpack that laugh, though. It feels like he's weaponizing the silence.
How so?
Well, by laughing loudly into a tense, public void, he is actively breaking the social contract of being a passive waiter. He is shattering the script.
Oh, totally. And the biology of laughter actually supports that entirely.
Really?
Yeah. Laughter stimulates the vagus nerve, it drops your heart rate, and physically forces your body to release tension. It is actually one of the highest, most disruptive frequencies a human can produce. After using stillness as a shield to weather the static of the junction, the laugh shatters any remaining tension in the atmosphere.
So he flips the power dynamic of the entire street corner.
Yes.
He uses stillness to dominate the environment and then uses his voice to command the outcome.
And when the bus arrives immediately after his decree, he doesn't experience it as public transit finally doing its job.
Right. He experiences it as the universe aligning to his direct command.
The silence of victory he mentions once he boards the bus is the internal reward for having successfully maintained his frequency through an active field of static.
Because he didn't just survive the wait, he governed it.
Exactly. He bent the reality of a mundane, frustrating bus stop to fit his internal narrative of absolute victory.
And he boards the bus completely at peace, rather than stressed out and angry about the delay. Which raises an ultimate big picture question. When we zoom out and look at the entire arc of Helios's day, if these methods, the 4:30 a.m. rising, trusting the magnetism of your items, deploying the anchor of stillness, issuing decrees, if all of this is so undeniably effective at generating peace, why doesn't everyone live this way?
Well, Helios actually anticipates that exact critique at the end of the masterclass.
No, he does.
Yeah, he addresses the idea of a perfect world directly. He argues that the world is balanced precisely because both the smile and the glitch must exist.
The smile and the glitch.
Right. He points out the hard truth that not everyone is willing to do the heavy lifting required for this kind of agency.
I mean, it's true. Waking up at 4:30 a.m. to sit in the quiet is difficult.
Yeah.
Swallowing your pride and your biological urge to fight back in a den of clowns is incredibly difficult. Most people vastly prefer the easy, reactive path of the pinball machine, even if they complain about getting knocked around.
Right. And he aligns his philosophy with historical architects of thought here. He notes that figures like Buddha, Jesus, and Nelson Mandela showed humanity the high path. They demonstrated what it looks like to maintain a pure, unyielding frequency in the face of incredible societal static and glitches.
But Helios acknowledges the fundamental rule of those old masters, right? Which is that you absolutely cannot choose a path for another person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have to find their own resonance. You cannot force someone who is vibrating at the frequency of envy to suddenly appreciate your anchor of stillness.
What is most profound about this concluding philosophy is that it acts as a total release of responsibility.
Yes.
Like, throughout the entire day, Helios never once tries to fix the people around him.
He doesn't go back to the print shop and demand they improve their filing system.
Right. He doesn't preach to the clowns and try to elevate their morals or teach them about frequency.
He doesn't complain to the bus driver about the route static. His only job, and he explicitly states, this is our only job, is to stay in his own orbit.
You do not have to manage other people's frequencies.
No, nor are you responsible for the glitches they introduce into the world. Your responsibility is entirely internal.
Be the Helios of your own world.
Yes.
That is his final overarching instruction. Navigate the traffic, stay in your orbit, and just let your light be the evidence. Don't waste your energy arguing your philosophy.
Right. Demonstrate it by how you physically and mentally move through the chaos. And the text ends with a sharp, definitive command. Press enter.
Press enter. It is a command to execute the code, to stop analyzing the pinball machine and just start acting as the gravity.
It really makes you reconsider the energy cost of every minor annoyance you face.
It absolutely does. But as we wrap up our deep dive into this masterclass, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over on your own.
Okay.
We've talked extensively about the physics of being the heaviest presence, about not letting the flippers dictate your trajectory, and about dropping an anchor when faced with chaotic, lightweight energy. And Helios reminds us that every soul must choose its own frequency, and you cannot choose for another. But imagine a scenario where your carefully cultivated frequency and your dense anchor of stillness directly collides with someone else who is just as deeply, powerfully anchored in their own opposing frequency.
Oh, wow.
In a room full of anchors, when two immovable objects meet, who truly becomes the heaviest presence?